Good. Hi, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here to discuss and probably answer part of the last question that Mel was asked about whether research is actually needed. I would start with the end, that I think it is almost given in a way that is needed, in the sense that it really depends on what you can get out of it. But more than anything, it really is part of our almost daily tool in the clinic. And I will go in the next 30 minutes about some of the complexities of what research results have given us, but at the same time, some of the good that research has been given us, and the positive effect that is done to our profession. So first of all, when we look at last year, and this is a slightly different look at what has been happening with acupuncture in general, you can see that overall there's a lot of good news about acupuncture. CNN has been talking about the promise of acupuncture for migraine treatment. You can see some benefits for breast cancer patients who are receiving aromatase, and the effect that acupuncture helps in joint pain. And of course, we have two high-profile celebrities that have reported on their use of acupuncture. Angelina Jolie has confessed that she used acupuncture for Bell's palsy, and that resulted in Bell's palsy being the most searched term in Google during the week of the publicity. And the new princess of the royal family of England has confessed that she's been using acupuncture and Eastern medicine for treating her migraines. And of course, this is wonderful news for us. People then go and search Dr. Google and find out that acupuncture works for certain things. But of course, we always have the skeptics. Mel has gone into great details of some of the skepticism and the solutions or the way to answer these skeptics, but we're still left with those headlines that can be sometimes nasty. The top one that you see there is the definition of acupuncture in Wikipedia, which Mel was one of the key participants in trying to change it, and was blocked by Wikipedia. But essentially, Wikipedia thinks that acupuncture is a pseudoscience. You have the Harvard review that talks about or debates whether acupuncture is a point in the right direction or a step in the dark. And something recent from the last month, an article that came out about more auricular acupuncture, suggesting that the veterans, US veteran, war veterans, deserve a science-based medicine and not quackery. And all of these things come up regularly as well. So we live in a world, of course, we don't live in China, where Chinese medicine is traditional practice. We live in a world where it really depends on the environment, the hospital, the Minister of Health, the Dean of the university, for them to define essentially whether our practice is a valid one, medically based, science-based, or is not. And at the same time, of course, we have a medical crisis, a real medical crisis, where the world, despite the progress of medicine and technology, doesn't have a solution for everything, or the solution that it has, like opioids, are not safe, to say the least, and create or result, the usage of them or inappropriate usage of them results in increase or huge number of deaths. This is the opioid crisis. It's huge in America. It's very big in Northern Europe and Eastern Europe as well. I know in your neighbors, Spain, it's quite an issue. I don't know if the situation is bad in Portugal, but this has really created an opening for us to come with our practice with evidence to offer a solution for an unmet medical need. And the same was not for the opioids only, but another crisis that came out in the last year or two is the fact that, or the evidence of real safety issues with, I would say, minor or safer pain relievers like Nurofen and Voltaren. And them in this research that made headlines, as you can see in the New York Times. This research is from Canada. Used 500,000, followed 500,000 patients, and noticed that there was a 50% chance, increased chance in getting a heart attack by using Nurofen, Advil, some of the easy pain relievers. And all of this, again, what happens with the health authorities or the Ministry of Health or whatever body governs pharmaceuticals in your country, creates an opportunity for us to come with the data that we have, if it's solid, and offer an alternative to these drugs. And a lot of this has happened over the last year, and I'll share some of the examples. So this is the environment we live in. We are not in China, as I said. We live in a Western society. Pharmaceuticals are the one that govern, that has the saying. And it takes a lot of effort from us to convince that acupuncture works. And with all the research that we have now, this is really an opportunity and a tool for us to use in our practice. So when I come to discuss why TCM is important and useful, part of the issue is that for many, many years before research has started, TCM is essentially an individually practiced medicine, and people have their own experience. People use their own needles and protocols that they've seen or learned. But what research can do is confirm the known ancient medicine using validated and well-accepted methodologies. It can also provide evidence that TCM works in certain diseases that people would not necessarily believe that it works. And that's good when you discuss with the establishment, which is Western medicine in hospitals. And it's also important when you discuss with policymakers, we try to integrate Chinese medicine into common practice, like is being done in pain and oncology and other diseases. It can explain how acupuncture works using modern technology. And that, I think, is more than anything, it's actually a lot of fun. So instead of getting into the discussion of whether qi exists, and a lot of other techniques that really help us understand and show what is the effect of needling certain points when using them to treat certain diseases. And universities with a lot of budget, like Harvard University, for example, can really afford this type of research. And that really helps in convincing people that it doesn't work just because of the energy that we give to our patients using the needles, or the energy transfer between one point and another, one part of the body to another part of the body, but it has a real effect on the biological level. It can also lead to the development of drugs and medical devices. There are drugs like the drug for malaria that is based on herbal medicine. There is used for pressing on pericardium 6 for nausea and vomiting, and several other herbs that have been used to medicines. Opens to different protocols that are used there. Not all of us work in Taiwan or Japan and get the chance to work in hospitals and experience people seeing thousands of patients. And by seeing those publications and research, we can actually be open to different protocols that are used elsewhere. So really, it is part of the toolbox, and the main reason is also because of the way we work and treat our patients. So of course, in our therapy toolbox, we have, as you can see, the TCM techniques, acupuncture, herbs, nutritional guidelines, lifestyle recommendations. Those of you who are using shiatsu or tuina, and of course the movement, breathing exercises of qigong and tai chi. But at the same time, we spend a lot of our time with patients, and that means that we talk to them. We explain to them, they ask questions, they ask questions about the disease and the reason why they came to us in the first place. But sometimes they also wonder if acupuncture can help in Crohn's disease or diabetes or whatever, and we're aware of the research data. We can, even if we don't specialize it in this condition, we can actually say confidently that it works or it doesn't work. And of course, we can also explain how it works. There are many times, and I'm sure that you have experienced it yourself, when we treat headaches or migraines, that we use liver 3 or Tai Chong, and at least my patients can definitely ask me, why am I needling them in the foot when they have a headache? So this is the type of questions that we get. We spend half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour with our patients, and they ask a lot of questions. And that means that we need to have answers other than just say that this is a ancient medicine and it works because it works. Of course, there are a lot of challenges in doing research. Western or pharmaceutical sponsored research is a lot more structured than Chinese medicine research. There's a very clear path between the animal data going on into phase 1 and 2 and 3, where you test the efficacy and the safety of the drugs. There's standard protocols, including the diagnosis, the treatment. Is there an issue? Is there a problem? Or everything is okay?
Everything's okay, don't worry.
Ah, okay, okay, because I can see someone and hear someone talking.
I'm going to control it, hopefully.
Okay, no worries. There's usually a single active ingredient with a very fixed dose and presentation. These trials usually take years, and they are very costly, and are sponsored by governments and pharma. When we talk about research in Chinese medicine, this is an individualized and experience-based medicine. It's very difficult to recruit unless you live in China, where you have the TCM hospitals and you have hundreds or thousands of patients going in every day. It's very difficult to recruit patients into studies in the Western world. There's a complex differential diagnosis. We all know it, that a headache is not just a headache. Acupuncture by itself is a multi-component intervention. There's hundreds of acupuncture points. We usually use more than one needle. It's affected by the therapist's experience, the time of acupuncture, the stimulation or not, the needle size. There's the issue of the placebo or sham needling that was raised earlier. With herbs, of course, we have hundreds of herbs and formulas, and they are made by different manufacturers. And of course, in the scope of Chinese medicine, we also have other manual techniques like Tuina, auriculotherapy, scalp acupuncture, YNSA, cupping, moxa. And then we, of course, have also nutrition and Qigong, which the problem with that is not only there's no standardized procedure or guidelines, but we also give it to our patients to continue and practice at their homes, and we never know what they do. We don't know if they follow the right sequence. We don't know if they take our recommendations, and that really makes TCM as per TCM very complex research to do, and that's why we've had a lot of problems over the years when the research was initiated probably 30, 40 years ago in China. At the same time, when I look at research regularly every week, I prefer to look at the half glass full than the half glass empty. There are the skeptics or critics who can really go into every single detail and try and compare what is not comparable, and try to compare it also to what I said, the Western research, and really find the issues that exist, and they do exist in Chinese medicine, but I'm not going to go into the details today. But at the same time, when you look at the broad picture, when you look from above, you can really see a lot of research coming in over the years, and the methodology is being improved for a lot of reasons. People have been using better placebos. People have been following the guidelines for publication. The Chinese have started following the guidelines for clinically good practice, and the stricter guidelines, which are guidelines for reporting on research in Chinese medicine. And suddenly you see higher quality data coming in over the last years, which means that the meta-analysis and the systematic reviews also prove more benefits for acupuncture and higher quality marks for the data that is being published. And indeed, when you look at what has been happening on the last 20 years in terms of the publication of research in PubMed, you can see the higher line. I'm not sure you can see my arrow going through it, but the higher line is the one that is on acupuncture. You can see that there is a significant increase in publications for acupuncture. There is also a nice increase generally for complementary and alternative medicine. And biomedicine is the one that has the smallest, I think, increase in publication and in research coming in. And in fact, if you look over the 20 years, you can see that pain is still the most researched area in Chinese medicine. Then you have the cancer, neoplasms, with breast cancer being the highest. And then you have arthritis and stroke, pregnancy and inflammatory diseases. And in fact, when you look at the research, where does it come from? So in terms of publications that are in English, 30% of them, approximately 30% of them coming from China. Then about 30% come from the US, and the rest comes from Japan, Korea, and at the bottom you have from Brazil and Italy. I personally only review nowadays research that is being published in the English language. I think that there's so many journals now available that if someone does research and chooses to publish it only in the Chinese language in the Journal of Yunnan, Neurology of Yunnan, and then there's probably an issue with the way the trial was studied, analyzed, and published. The Bible, the current Bible, sorry for using the word for research in acupuncture, is the Acupuncture Evidence Project. I'm sure most of you have it, and if you don't have it, you should go down you should download the PDF of it. It was done in Australia by John McDonald and Stephen Johns, and essentially what they did was to review the evidence for 122 medical conditions, and they gave it marks in the same way that is being done in other therapeutic, in other medicines, and they've given to 8 conditions the strong evidence, which means that the evidence there cannot be disputed. It's consistent. It's a large body of evidence with a lot of patients. They've given moderate evidence to 38 conditions, which is quite nice as well. And then 76 other conditions get weak or unclear evidence. The conditions that get the thumbs up, the like, as Facebook like, is migraine, headaches, lower back pain, allergic rhinitis, osteoarthritis, and then chemo or post-operation nausea and vomiting, and post-operation pain. They also give some data on cost effectiveness, evidence for cost effectiveness, excuse me. But there's also plenty of good quality research that is being published. And when I teach in Israel or abroad about the evidence for Chinese medicine, we have beyond just migraine and pain. We have good evidence in oncology. We have good evidence in digestive disorders, in anxiety, in depression, in insomnia. A lot of good research on gynecology and fertility, and in respiratory diseases. And of course, there's a lot of research, good research on the safety of acupuncture and the mechanism of action, or how acupuncture works. So what I want to do now is go into 2 or 3 therapeutic areas where if it wasn't for, so there is a medical, there is an unmet medical need where there's an issue, either because there are not enough drugs there, or the drugs create an issue. And if it wasn't for the research that was done in Chinese medicine and the solid data that comes from the research, we wouldn't be able to see the recommendations that come along now on the evidence that acupuncture should be used along with these drugs. The first one, of course, is pain. It is a big issue with opioids. I showed it in the first slide, but essentially in the US, every 3 minutes, a woman goes into the emergency department with issues related to over or misuse or abuse of painkillers. And essentially 140 people die every day in the US from opioid overdose. But opioids are not the only problem. As I said earlier, 2 other major articles that came in the last year show that non-steroidal drugs, anti-inflammatory drugs, just like Nurofen, Advil, Celebrex, and Voltaren, cause myocardial infarction or heart disease. These 2 studies were published in 2017, one with 500,000 people from Canada and one with 10,000 patients from Denmark. And that means that there is an opportunity for us to discuss an alternative treatment using acupuncture if we have the evidence. And indeed, we do have the evidence, and that creates an opportunity for us. So first of all of this as a medical crisis resulted in the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, coming up with guidelines on how to prescribe opioids. And even the FDA approves a drug or doesn't approve a drug. They don't usually give recommendations to physicians on how to treat their patients. And what they've done in a recommendation that came out at the end of last year is that they said that there are a number of non-pharmacologic therapies that are available to use in pain treatment. And of course, it includes psychological approaches, physical rehabilitation, surgical approaches, and complementary therapies such as acupuncture. That has led to the American College of Physicians, which is the biggest association of physicians in America, to come up with guidelines for treating acute, subacute, and chronic lower back pain. And you can see the recommendations one by one, but essentially recommendation 1 and 2 are referring to acute and subacute lower back pain and chronic pain, and all of them recommend first and foremost to use non-pharmacologic approaches like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, acupuncture, laser therapy, and only then, if it doesn't work, recommendation 3 that is, if it doesn't work, go into the non-steroidal drug, and only if they don't work, go into the opioid. So very clear guidelines coming from the biggest association in America that suggests to first use acupuncture and other non-pharmacological techniques, then the non-steroidal drugs, then the opioids. The same for the American Medical Association, also recommending exactly the same. And all of this would not have come if acupuncture didn't have any research, solid and robust research evidence to show. So this is the most important study that you're probably aware of from 2012 from Hugh McPherson's group that had a look at acupuncture for chronic pain. It's a meta-analysis that reviewed all types of all types of pain, including headaches, muscle pain, and osteoarthritis, and showing that acupuncture is superior to sham or no acupuncture, significantly superior. The importance of this study is also on the fact that last year they published a subset of this group that was followed for several years, and what they showed is that 90% of the effect was maintained for up to 1 year. So not only acupuncture is good for treating pain, but the effect once you stop treating with acupuncture is maintained for at least a year, or there's only 10% loss in the efficacy of acupuncture over time. The great thing is what Mel has shown in a previous presentation as well, something that was published just this month, is that they went back and saw and checked whether there's any additional randomized control studies to include in their meta-analysis, and they included additional 13 studies. So now we are talking about 21,000 patients. In the 2012 study, we had 18,000 patients. And the good news is, of course, that acupuncture is better than sham acupuncture or no treatment, and that 85% of the patients still had the benefits of the acupuncture 1 year after they stopped using acupuncture. So the effect of acupuncture is great during treatment and 1 year after treatment. And it's this type of research and this type of information that is very useful for us when we have medical crises like what we have now with the opioids and with the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. In fact, just following the publication of this data, the American Association of Family Practitioners have published their opinion on the research, and the headline is positive. It shows that research finds acupuncture effective for chronic pain. But then they go into the fact that family practitioners, in fact, don't know enough about acupuncture, its efficacy, its safety, and how it is being done in order to refer patients to that. So this is an issue that is actually taken upon ourselves to try and educate the medical community about the data that we have when we have solid data, so that they understand it, and when they think that they don't have any solution for the patients because they've tried enough drugs and nothing worked, or these are patients that you don't want to give opioids to, or they react in a negative way to the non-steroidal drugs, they can actually recommend acupuncture if they actually understood it. And this is what they show here, that the American Association of Medical Acupuncture have actually taken a step in educating family physicians about acupuncture so that they can actually recommend it after. So this is a work for our association, our schools, our profession all over the world to try and teach where it's possible about the magic of acupuncture so that doctors can refer their patients. And putting in perspective, again, this would only happen if we had research. This is a great article from a year ago that had a look at the effect of different drugs or any different approaches, including aerobic exercise, including acupuncture, and of course all the drugs for osteoarthritis, and had a look at their effect size from the clinical data that was published on the respective drugs. So you can see here there are acetaminophen, which are essentially not effective for osteoarthritis. COX-2 inhibitors, which are quite effective with a moderate effect size of 0.44. Opioids, which are the highest effective, 0.8 almost effect size. And then at the bottom of this table, you have acupuncture versus sham acupuncture, which has a moderate effect, and acupuncture versus a pragmatic comparator, which has the second highest effect. And if it wasn't for all the research that is available, we wouldn't be having this comparison, which is something that you can take to your patients or to colleagues in medical establishments, in universities, in the Ministry of Health, and discuss with them the benefits that acupuncture can offer their patient alongside the drugs. If we move to another condition, headaches and migraines, we can see here the guidelines from the not so nice NICE. The NICE is the National Institute for Health Excellence from the UK, a body that repeatedly doesn't like acupuncture and actually many drugs as well, simply because they try to save money for the British government. But they have given recommendation on the diagnosis and management of headaches, and they clearly say that for tension type headache, for prophylactic treatment, you should be considering a course of up to 10 sessions over 5 to 8 weeks. And the same for migraines, with or without aura, patient should be given 10 sessions of acupuncture over 5 to 8 weeks, according to the person's preference. Now, NICE would have never given such recommendation had they not seen robust research, and that came out from two beautiful gifts that we received in 2016 and 17 from the Cochrane Institute. The Cochrane Institute is the institute in the world that conducts meta-analysis and systematic reviews, and they have shown in this review that acupuncture is very useful for the prevention of episodic migraine. They included 22 studies with more than 5,000 patients, and what they showed was that if you started with 6 days of migraine per month, you ended up with 5 days if you used usual care, 4 days if you used sham acupuncture, and 3.5 days, so almost 50% reduction if you used true acupuncture. And it's this type of solid data that allows the bodies, the governing bodies in countries, to give recommendations for the usage of for acupuncture. The same for headache. I'm not going to go through the data, but similar results were shown with tension type headache. If we move into oncology, another field where we don't claim that we can treat cancer, even though in China or in Taiwan they may be using herbs usually to treat cancer, but certainly we have very solid data for palliative, for supportive care in oncology, and that really has led for the integration of complementary medicine, including acupuncture and herbs, into hospitals. This is a center in Tel Aviv. If any one of you would come to the ICCM Congress in the coming years, we have a hospital, we have a day of hospital visits, and this is a wonderful center that has integrated complementary medicine, not only acupuncture, but other complementary medicines as well, to the fight against cancer. And similar integrative centers exist. This one is in Harvard, the Osher Center. And that all again comes from solid research, one of which I'm showing you here, and the effectiveness of acupuncture and related therapies for the support of cancer. 1 second, I see that I thought it was a message from one of you. More research comes on safety, for example. This is the NIH, the National Institute of Health in America. That's the complementary and integrative health arm, and they have Q&A there for the public and for the medical community. And they would not write what they've written about the safety of acupuncture if there wasn't a lot of systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Just 2 of the 3 here that I'm showing you are studies that have looked at data from more than 300,000 patients and showing that acupuncture is actually safe. Mel has shown you in the previous presentation that medical error is the 3rd leading cause of death in the US. Well, in perspective, acupuncture is a lot safer, but every time there's a small accident with acupuncture, we get hammered for it. And finally, of course, research can give a lot of information about how acupuncture or the magic works. This is a wonderful review that I used time and time again from 2004 that was looking at all the data that was available on electroacupuncture for treating pain on different points, whether it was gallbladder 34, liver 3, large intestine 4, whatever, and trying to summarize the effect that exists from the effect on the brain all the way down to the periphery. And what you can see here, just highlighted in red, some of the data suggests that electroacupuncture increases the concentration of 5-HT, which is the precursor of serotonin. It reduces a lot of the pro-inflammatory proteins that exist in our body and react to pain. And more importantly, down at the bottom of the slide, you can see the effect on COX-2 and prostaglandins, which are the pain mediators, the one that signal to the body, to the brain, that there is a pain and that the body should react to it. This is exactly the same way as the COX-2 inhibitors work, but without the side effects of the COX-2 inhibitors. And that all of it comes from research. A lot of research that has been going on in Harvard as well for what needles do, and do meridians exist or not, and was published in recent years. And coming from Harvard again, and hitting the headlines. So this really made headlines this year, explaining to physicians on the difference between placebo acupuncture and real acupuncture. And what you can see here is that essentially what real acupuncture does is rewires the network in the brain, and therefore you have lasting effect, whereas sham acupuncture works in a very, very short term, but that the effect is not lasted as measured by the structure of the brain. These are two great studies if you're into brain studies and MRIs, and they actually also hit the public. But this type of research makes people curious about acupuncture and trying to understand more about how it works and when it works. So I hope that I've shown you that as part of our toolbox, of course, we have all the TCM techniques and beyond Japanese acupuncture, if you're using that, scalp acupuncture, any of the techniques that you have in your daily toolbox in the clinic. But at the same time, living in the Western world, living in our day-to-day clinic, we have to react to the conversation that we have with our patients who ask a lot of questions, so that they also understand how acupuncture works and get the information they need if they want to share it, so that we can also expand acupuncture beyond just pain into other therapeutic areas where it has already been demonstrated that acupuncture works. And of course, to communicate with the authorities, with hospitals, to get or to establish or to build integrative units in oncology, in orthopedic, in many other areas that we can tap into, and also to insurance companies and to the Ministry of Health to allow for acupuncture to be part of the health insurance. So not all of us care about it. Many practitioners just want to work in the clinic, not explain to the patient how it works, just do the work, do the acupuncture. But for many of us, for schools also and for associations, it is very, very important in order to get acupuncture more accepted. So I want to thank you, obrigado, for inviting me. And if you have any questions on acupuncture, on Chinese medicine, generally I review a lot of research that is relevant to our profession or on acupuncture on Facebook. This is the Dr. Gil TCM is the Facebook page, also on YouTube. And of course, if you have any questions, you can send emails. And I'm also proud to be part of the evidence-based acupuncture project, which Mel is the director of. And the EBA has produced several summaries of the evidence. This one that I'm showing here is the acupuncture for pain that Mel actually wrote. And there are several others. And we highly recommend for you to join and support the EBA as well. So thank you very much.
Gil, also thank you very, very much for the excellent presentation. I'm going to ask if anyone has questions to ask. I myself have one. What could be done to improve the quality of the research that has been done both for acupuncture and TCM? Is there would it be reasonable to develop guidelines of what should not be done in research? Could there be a way to improve the research in our fields?
Thanks a lot for the question. First of all, I think that research has improved significantly over the years. I think that 20 or 30 years ago, when researchers in our profession were trying to imitate the pharmaceutical type of research, we were probably desperate to look for placebo. And that's where sham acupuncture came into practice. But what we have discovered, of course, is that when you stick needles in people, something happens and it creates an effect. I think that was the biggest mistake that was done 20, 30 years ago, but research has significantly improved since. First of all, in my opinion, a lot of the research that we see nowadays compares to drugs. And when we compare to drug and we show either equivalence or superiority, we're in a very good place. I'm not sure the medical profession or the pharmaceutical industry will like it, but we are in a good place. And in fact, a lot of the research that comes out in the last decade does show that. We also have a significant improvement in sham needling. So understanding that needles do something, people and certain protocols have improved on how to conduct these. And also a lot of the research that came out from China that was really poor quality have started following, like I said, good clinical practice guidelines and the stricter guidelines, which were really created by the best researchers in Chinese medicine research in the world over the previous decade. And they have also improved the way the research is being done and the way it is being reported. So in my opinion, we see a lot of good research coming in now, which is why in a lot of the meta-analysis and the systematic reviews, we begin to see more positive data for different conditions, simply because the data that has been coming out from the RCTs is more convincing. So I'm quite optimistic when I look at the research that is being done. I think that those who insist on doing sham needling the way it was done, which is just sticking needling in areas that are close to the area, are probably doing wrong, because that may create also too much of a positive effect, and the result would not be positive. But other than that, if people follow a lot of the research that has been done in the last 5 years, definitely, even from China, the improvements are already there, and therefore the data is already there. So I'm quite optimistic.
Posso estar ali preparado. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, good, because the computer is lazy and we are waiting for it. So many thanks, both of you, Mel and Gil. We appreciate too much your presentations. And in this occasion in Portugal, we probably don't have the really meaning of this journey. We hope things will be better in future. I would like to thank also to the direction of my school in the behalf of the subdirector Luís Cid for the classroom and the web device. So we will meet next in another occasion. I hope the group will grow much more, and I would like to ask and invite, if you want to write a paper with this communication for a peer review edition, I will send the details in next week. For you could send me the till the end of July, maybe second week of July. So many thanks. We appreciate too much, and we have too much things to digest from.
Okay.
See you. Many thanks. We will.
Thank you.
50 minutes for my presentation is a little different, but much more classroom and is Portuguese. So I will. Many thanks, both of you.
Thanks a lot.
Many thanks.